Out of all my kids, you're the most useless one, my mom said as everyone stared. I stood up and replied, then stop calling me every time you need money. Her face went pale, and the whole room went silent. You know that moment when you think everything's finally falling into place, only for your world to explode in the most public, humiliating way possible? That was me last Christmas. I walked into my family's holiday dinner ready to share the two biggest, happiest pieces of news of my entire life, hoping for acceptance, for praise, for maybe, just maybe, a flicker of pride from my mother. Instead, that night ripped open years of unspoken resentment and financial secrets, changing my family dynamics forever. And honestly, it was the best damn thing that ever happened to me. See, growing up, I was Linda, the middle child, which in my family meant I was practically invisible. My older brother, Michael? He was the golden boy, the doctor, incapable of doing wrong in my mom, Patricia's, eyes. She still brings up his medical journal publications at every family gathering. Then there was my younger sister, Karen, the precious baby, the successful lawyer who could get away with anything. And me? I was stuck in the middle, scrambling for crumbs of attention and love they seemed to inherit effortlessly. From the jump, I knew I had to work twice as hard for half the recognition. Michael brought home B's and got showered with praise. I had to pull straight A's just for a nod. Karen would throw epic tantrums, break things, and it was cute, she was expressing herself. I so much as raised my voice and I was disrespectful, needing an attitude adjustment. I remember grinding through high school, working part-time at the grocery store, tutoring kids, not because we needed the money, but because I thought financial contribution might make them see my worth. I saved every single penny. I bought my mom thoughtful gifts, spent weeks picking them out. Michael and Karen would grab something last minute from the mall, and somehow, their gifts always got the biggest smiles, the longest hugs. It cut deep, every single time. College was supposed to be my escape, my chance to prove myself. I fell in love with marketing, the creativity, the strategy, the way you could tell a story that moved people. But when I told my family, my mother's face just fell. Marketing, she sneered, her voice dripping with disappointment. That's not a real career, Linda. That's just playing with pretty pictures. Why can't you be more like Michael and actually help people? Or Karen, something that requires real intelligence? Those words stung, badly. But I pushed through. I graduated with honors, landed a job at a small firm downtown. I worked my way up, taking on extra projects, staying late, coming in early. Every small win, a new client, a successful campaign, I'd call home, bursting with excitement. And every single conversation ended the same way, "That's nice, dear. Did I tell you Michael just got published again? Or Karen just won another big case?" It was relentless. For years, I kept trying. Cards for every holiday, weekly calls, remembering every birthday, every anniversary. When my parents moved at 26, I spent my entire vacation painting walls, organizing boxes, while my busy siblings were nowhere to be found. I even dog-sat their German Shepherd, knowing I'm allergic, spending weekends sneezing and popping antihistamines, just because they asked. Last spring, when my dad, Robert, had emergency gallbladder surgery, I was the one who took time off work, drove him to appointments, sat with my mom in the waiting room for 6 hours. Michael was in surgery, Karen in court. And still, I was the one lectured later about not updating them frequently enough. The worst part wasn't the lack of recognition. It was the constant, soul-crushing comparison. Every family dinner became an endurance test, listening to endless praise for achievements that, frankly, weren't any more impressive than my own, but were treated like Nobel Prize wins because they came from the golden children. But this past fall, things in my life finally started clicking. David and I had been dating for 2 years, and he proposed during an October trip to the mountains. The ring was simple, perfect. But more importantly, he saw me in a way my family never had. He celebrated my wins, encouraged my creative projects, never once made me feel like I had to compete for his attention. Around the same time, I got promoted to senior marketing coordinator, a big raise, and the chance to lead my own team. It was everything I'd worked for. And for the first time, I felt genuinely proud. I couldn't wait to share it all at Christmas, thinking, maybe this time will be different. Christmas morning started the way it always did. Same decorations, same smells, same music. I arrived at 10 a.m., arms full of presents, heart buzzing with nervous excitement. David was with his family, but we'd planned our own celebration. I'd been carrying my engagement ring in my purse for 2 months, wanting to tell them in person. My dad greeted me with one of his warm bear hugs. He's always been the more emotionally available parent, the one who actually listened. "There's my marketing genius," he said, taking the gifts. "How's the new position treating you?" I lit up. "Actually, Dad, I have some really exciting news to share." Oh, yeah? Can't wait to hear it, sweetheart. Then my mom appeared, wearing the red cashmere sweater I bought her last year. She looked me up and down with that expression. You know the one, finding fault before you even say hello. Linda, what on earth are you wearing? That green dress washes you out. And your hair looks like you just rolled out of bed. Merry Christmas to you too, Mom? I forced a smile. I actually spent an hour on my hair. Well, you should have spent two, she retorted, turning back to the kitchen. Karen looks absolutely stunning in her new navy suit. You should ask her where she shops. Karen, already in the living room, did look gorgeous. Tailored navy outfit, probably cost more than my monthly rent. Michael was on the couch, expensive watch, designer sweater, scrolling through hospital messages. Look who finally decided to show up, Karen smirked. We've been waiting to start presents. I'm literally 5 minutes late because I stopped for gas, I replied, but nobody was listening. The gift exchange went exactly as expected. Michael gave last-minute, expensive gift cards. Mom gushed. Karen gave our parents a fancy spa weekend. 20 minutes of praise. I'd spent weeks on personalized gifts, a vintage medical textbook for Michael, an engraved leather briefcase for Karen, a custom photo album for my parents with digitized, restored family photos. Oh, how nice, my mother said, flipping through the album quickly. This must have taken some time. About 40 hours, I said. I had to scan old photos, restore damaged ones, then design the layouts. Michael, show everyone that new watch your colleague gave you. Just like that, the conversation moved on. My dad squeezed my shoulder. This is beautiful, Linda. Thank you. But the moment was gone. As the afternoon wore on, more family arrived. Aunt Susan, Uncle Frank, cousins, Grandma Eleanor. I gravitated to the kitchen, helping with dinner. Turkey needs to come out in 20 minutes, Mom instructed. Someone needs to set the table. Where's Karen? She's in the living room, talking to Grandma Eleanor. Well, she shouldn't have to worry about kitchen work. She worked so hard this week. I bit my tongue. I worked just as hard, but that never seemed to factor into her calculations. Dinner approached, my nerves building. I'd planned to announce my news during dessert. Everyone would be relaxed. I kept touching the ring box in my purse. This is good news, happy news, I told myself. But watching my mother light up every time Michael mentioned his latest case or Karen talked about a court victory, I started to wonder if I was just setting myself up for disappointment. Again. Dinner was served at 3 p.m. sharp. My mother's finest china. Grandma Eleanor at one end, Dad at the other. I was wedged between my youngest cousin and Grandpa's empty chair. The conversation flowed easily, Michael's expanding practice, Karen's promotion to junior partner, my cousin Janet's wedding plans. I participated when spoken to, laughed at bad jokes, complimented haircuts, all while waiting for my moment. So, Linda, my grandmother said during a lull. Are you still working at that little advertising company downtown? Marketing company, Grandma. And yes, I am. Actually, I have some exciting news about that. Before I could continue, my mother jumped in. Linda thinks making pretty pictures for businesses is the same as a real career. I keep telling her she should go back to school for something more substantial, like nursing or teaching. Marketing is a real career, Mom, I said, trying to keep my voice even. It requires a lot of strategy and analysis. I just got promoted to senior coordinator. I'll be leading my own team. Oh, that's wonderful, honey. Aunt Susan said kindly. Congratulations. Thank you. And actually, I have even bigger news. I reached into my purse, pulled out the small velvet box. My heart was pounding. This was it. David proposed. We're engaged. I opened the box, revealing the solitaire ring. The reaction? Not quite what I hoped. A moment of silence. Then polite congratulations. My father's face broke into a genuine smile. My grandmother squeezed my hand. But my mother's expression remained unchanged. Almost bored. When did this happen? Karen asked. In October. We went to the mountains, and he proposed on a hike. It was perfect. October, my mother's voice was sharp. You've been engaged for 2 months and you're just telling us now? That's just typical of you, Linda. Always so secretive. No wonder we never know what's going on in your life. The familiar sting of criticism disguised as concern. I'm not secretive, Mom. I call every week. I just wanted this to be special. What does David do again? Michael asked, even though I'd told him at least 3 times. He's a high school English teacher. A teacher? My mother repeated the word, dripping with disappointment. Well, I suppose that's stable employment, at least. The way she said it, I knew what she was thinking, asterisk not impressive enough. Not successful enough. Not good enough for her daughter, asterisk never mind that David was kind, intelligent, funny, and treated me like I was the most important person in his world. He's a wonderful man, my grandmother said firmly. When do we get to meet him properly? Soon, I hope. He's with his family in Portland, but we're planning dinner next month. I hope he knows what he's getting into, Karen said with a laugh that didn't reach her eyes. Linda's always been the difficult one in the family. I'm not difficult. I protested. But my mother was already nodding. Linda has always been challenging, she said, as if I weren't sitting right there. She's never quite figured out how to make things easy on herself or anyone else. The words hit me like a physical blow. But I tried to shake it off. This was supposed to be a celebration. I couldn't let them ruin it. Well, I think it's wonderful news, my father said, raising his glass. To Linda and David. May you be very happy together. A few half-hearted clinks. The moment felt forced, awkward. The conversation quickly moved on. I sat there, ring box still in my hands, feeling smaller and more insignificant than ever. As dessert was served, my mother launched into Michael's latest achievements, featured in a medical journal, invited to speak at a conference, considered for a position at University Hospital. Each accomplishment was described in glowing detail, her pride practically radiating. And Karen, she continued, just won the biggest case of her career. 6-figure settlement. They're talking about fast-tracking her to full partner. That's amazing, I said, genuinely meaning it. Congratulations, Karen. Thanks, she said, attention already back on her phone. I sat there, listening to the praise heaped on my siblings, waiting for someone to circle back to my engagement or promotion. It never happened. It was as if I'd never spoken, as if my news didn't matter enough for more than a few seconds of attention. That's when my mother looked directly at me and said the words that would change everything between us forever. You know, Linda, I've been thinking about this engagement of yours, and I have to be honest. I'm worried about David. I mean, what kind of man proposes to you? The table went quiet. Even my cousins looked up from their phones. What do you mean? I asked, though I was afraid I already knew. Well, let's be realistic here. You're 32. You work in a job that barely pays the bills. You live in that tiny apartment, and you've never really accomplished anything significant. You're the most useless child we have. I just hope David realizes what he's signing up for before it's too late. The silence that followed was deafening. I felt every pair of eyes on me, waiting to see how I'd react. My Aunt Susan looked horrified. My father was shaking his head. Even Michael and Karen seemed shocked by the sheer cruelty. But for the first time in my life, instead of shrinking back, instead of making excuses, instead of trying to laugh it off, I felt something different rise up inside me. It was anger, yes, but more than that, it was clarity. 32 years of suppressed frustration and hurt, finally finding its voice. I stood up slowly, my hands trembling with emotion, and looked my mother directly in the eyes. Then stop calling me when you need money, I said. My voice was steady. Clear. Her face fell. The silence that followed was so complete I could hear the grandfather clock ticking, the distant Christmas music still playing. My mother's face went from confident superiority to something I'd never seen, genuine shock, mixed with panic. What are you talking about? She asked, her voice having lost all its earlier authority. I'm talking about the $1,500 I've been sending you every month for the past 2 years to cover your car payments, because Dad's business was struggling. I'm talking about the $3,000 I gave you last spring when he needed surgery and your insurance wouldn't cover all the costs. I'm talking about the $2,000 I sent to help pay for Karen's bar exam fees because she'd already spent her trust fund on that trip to Europe. I reached into my purse, pulled out my phone, opening my banking app with surprisingly steady fingers. Want to see the receipts? I continued, holding up the screen. Because I have them all right here. Every transfer. Every check. Every emergency loan that somehow never got paid back. My Aunt Susan stared, mouth slightly open. Uncle Frank had put down his fork, listening intently. My grandmother was nodding slowly, like puzzle pieces were clicking. Linda, my father started, but I wasn't finished. Remember last Christmas, when Michael's student loans went into default because his new practice wasn't bringing in enough money yet? Who do you think paid those off? It wasn't Mom and Dad, because they were still recovering from Dad's medical bills. It was me. For $1,000 I'd been saving for a down payment on a house. Michael's face had gone pale. Linda, I didn't know. Of course, you didn't know, because Mom made me promise not to tell anyone. She said it would embarrass you, and that I should just consider it my contribution to the family. My contribution? As if I haven't been contributing my entire adult life. I turned back to my mother, who was opening and closing her mouth, trying to find words that wouldn't come. You want to know what kind of man proposes to someone like me? The kind who sees that I've been single-handedly keeping this family financially afloat while working my supposedly meaningless job and living in my supposedly pathetic apartment. The kind who recognizes that maybe, just maybe, I've been sacrificing my own financial security and dreams to take care of everyone else. I never asked you to, my mother began, weakly. You absolutely did ask. You called me crying about the car payments. You called me panicking about Dad's surgery. You called me begging for help with Karen's fees. And every single time, I helped. Because that's what families do. But apparently, that's what the useless child does, while the successful ones get all the credit and none of the responsibility. Karen finally spoke up, her voice small. I didn't know you paid for my bar exam. Because I wasn't supposed to tell you. Just like I wasn't supposed to tell anyone about the money I've been lending Mom and Dad, or the payment I made on Michael's loans, or the countless other times I've bailed this family out of financial trouble. I opened my banking app again and started reading actual numbers and dates. September 15, 2022, $1,500 to Patricia Walsh for car payment. October 3, $1,500 to Patricia Walsh for car payment. November 7, $2,000 to Robert Walsh for medical expenses. December 19, $1,500 to Patricia Walsh for car payment. My father was staring at my mother with an expression I'd never seen. Patricia, is this true? It's not what it sounds like, she said quickly. Linda was just helping out temporarily while we got back on our feet. Temporarily? I laughed, but there was no humor in it. It's been 2 years, Mom. 2 years of monthly payments. 2 years of me prioritizing your financial stability over my own. 2 years of me living paycheck to paycheck while you drove around in a car I was paying for, complaining about how unsuccessful your useless daughter is. My grandmother reached across the table and grabbed my hand. Honey, why didn't you tell any of us about this? Because I thought if I could just help enough, if I could just prove my value to this family in some way, maybe I'd finally earn the love and respect that Michael and Karen seemed to get for free. I thought if I could be useful, even if it was just financially, maybe Mom would stop looking at me like I was a disappointment. The tears I'd been holding back for years finally came, but they weren't tears of sadness anymore. They were tears of release. Of finally speaking a truth I'd been carrying alone for so long. You want to know what David sees in me? I continued, my voice growing stronger. He sees someone who's been working 2 jobs to support her family while they belittle her career. He sees someone who's been giving up her own dreams and financial goals to make sure everyone else in her family is okay. He sees someone who's been the real backbone of this family while being treated like she's worthless. Michael was shaking his head. Linda, I had no idea. If I'd known you were the one who paid off my loans. You'd what? You'd have treated me with basic respect? You'd have defended me when Mom made her snide comments? Because that's all I ever wanted. Not gratitude, not praise. Just basic human decency. I turned to Karen, who was staring down at her plate. And you? Do you have any idea how many times I've covered for you? Not just financially, but in every other way? When you were too hungover to help Mom move, who do you think spent her weekend packing boxes? When you were too busy to visit Dad in the hospital, who do you think sat with him for hours? Linda, my father said quietly. I'm so sorry. I had no idea your mother was asking you for money. She made me promise not to tell you. She said it would hurt your pride, and that you were the most financially stable one, so it was your responsibility to help. Funny how I went from being the most useless to the most financially stable, depending on what she needed from me. My mother finally found her voice again. You're being dramatic, Linda. Families help each other. That's what we do. No, Mom. What families do is support each other emotionally and treat each other with respect. What you do is take my money while telling everyone how worthless I am. What you do is use me as a financial safety net while treating me like an embarrassment. I stood up, pushing my chair back. Well, congratulations. You're about to find out exactly how useless I really am. Because as of today, the bank of Linda is permanently closed. The aftermath of my revelation was immediate, chaotic. Conversations erupted simultaneously. Aunt Susan demanded to know how long this had been going on. Uncle Frank asked my father if he knew. My grandmother looked at my mother with deep disappointment. Linda, wait, my mother said, standing as I gathered my purse and coat. Let's talk about this privately. There's no need to air our family business in front of everyone. Our family business? I turned back to face her. You mean the family business where you humiliate me in front of these same people every chance you get? The family business where you announce to everyone that I'm the most useless child you have? I think they're entitled to know the truth about how this family really operates. You're being vindictive, she accused, but her voice was shaking. I'm being honest. For the first time in my adult life, I'm being completely honest about what's been happening in this family. And if that makes you uncomfortable, maybe you should ask yourself why. My cousin Janet spoke up. Linda, are you serious about the money? You've really been supporting them financially? Dead serious. I can show you bank statements going back years if you want proof. My father was staring at my mother, a mixture of confusion and anger. Patricia, we need to talk, right now. Not in front of everyone, she hissed. Why not? I shot back. You had no problem discussing Linda's failures in front of everyone. You had no problem announcing to the entire table that she's useless. So why is it suddenly inappropriate to discuss the truth? Michael finally spoke, his voice quiet. Linda, about my student loans. I genuinely didn't know. I thought Mom and Dad had helped me out. I know you didn't know, I said, and I meant it. None of you knew because I was specifically told not to tell you. But Michael, can I ask you something? In all the years we've been adults, have you ever once asked me if I needed help with anything? Have you ever inquired about my finances, my career struggles, my personal life beyond the bare minimum? He was quiet for a long moment. No, he finally admitted. I guess I assumed you were doing fine. You assumed I was doing fine because it was easier than actually paying attention to my life. Just like it was easier for Karen to assume someone else would handle the family emergencies, and easier for Mom to assume I'd always be there to bail everyone out while she criticized everything about me. Karen finally looked up from her plate. I don't understand why you didn't just say no if you didn't want to help. Because I did want to help. I exclaimed. I wanted to help because I loved this family, despite everything. I wanted to help because I thought maybe if I proved my value in some tangible way, I'd finally be treated like I mattered. But I see now that no amount of financial support was ever going to change how you all see me. My grandmother cleared her throat, and the room went quiet. When Eleanor Walsh spoke, people listened. Patricia, she said, her voice stern in a way I rarely heard. I am deeply disappointed in you. This young woman has been sacrificing her own financial security to help this family, and you've been treating her like she's worthless. That's not just ungrateful, it's cruel. Mother, you don't understand the whole situation, my mom started. I understand enough. I understand that Linda has been working 2 jobs to support herself and apparently half this family, while you've been telling everyone who'll listen that she's not good enough. I understand that she just announced her engagement, which should be one of the happiest moments of her life, and instead of celebrating with her, you used it as an opportunity to tear her down. The room was silent, except for my mother's rapid breathing. I'd never seen her called out so directly by her own mother. And another thing, my grandmother continued. I've watched this girl grow up, and she's never been anything but kind, generous, and hardworking. If she's the most useless child you have, Patricia, then you have no idea how to measure a person's worth. Aunt Susan nodded emphatically. I have to agree with Mom. Linda, I had no idea you were dealing with all of this. I always wondered why you seemed so stressed during family gatherings. I wasn't stressed, I said quietly. I was exhausted. Emotionally, financially, physically exhausted from trying to be enough for a family that had already decided I never would be. My mother made one last attempt to regain control. Linda, you're making this sound much worse than it is. We're family. We help each other. And I never said you were worthless. You said I was the most useless child you have. In front of everyone, after I just told you I was engaged. What exactly would you call that? She opened her mouth, but no words came out. You know what, Mom? It doesn't matter anymore. I'm done trying to earn your approval. I'm done sacrificing my own happiness and financial security for people who don't even see me as a real person. I'm done being the family safety net while being treated like the family disappointment. I walked toward the door, but turned back one more time. My wedding is going to be beautiful. David and I are going to build a wonderful life together. And we're going to do it without the constant criticism and emotional manipulation that I've been accepting as normal for the past 32 years. Anyone who wants to be part of that life with respect and kindness is welcome. Anyone who doesn't can keep my phone number for emergencies, but don't expect me to answer. And with that, I walked out of my childhood home, leaving behind a table full of shocked faces and a mother who was finally experiencing what it felt like to be the one left speechless. The week following Christmas was unlike anything I'd ever experienced. My phone started ringing before I even made it home that evening, and it didn't stop for days. But for the first time in my adult life, I wasn't answering every call immediately. I wasn't dropping everything to manage other people's emotions or solve their problems. David flew back from Portland 2 days early when I called him crying from my car in my parents' driveway. He found me sitting on my couch at 11 that night, still in my Christmas dress, staring at my phone as it buzzed. I can't believe I actually did that, I kept saying. I can't believe I finally said all of that out loud. I can, he said, pulling me close. I've been waiting for you to stand up to them for 2 years. I just didn't want to push because I knew you had to get there on your own. But what if I was wrong? What if I was too harsh? Linda, he said gently, you've been paying your mother's car payment for 2 years while she told people you were useless. There's no universe in which you were too harsh. The messages poured in that night and continued for days. My father called first, his voice heavy with what sounded like genuine regret. Linda, honey, I had no idea your mother was asking you for money. I'm so sorry. Dad, it's not just about the money. It's about the way she's treated me my entire life. The money was just the final straw. I know, sweetheart. I've been thinking a lot about that since you left. And you're right. I should have stood up for you more over the years. I should have said something when she made those comments. It was the first real apology I'd ever received from anyone in my family, and it meant more than I could express. Michael called the next day. Linda, I feel terrible about the loan situation. I want to pay you back. It's not about paying me back, Michael. It's about the fact that for all these years, you've been perfectly happy to assume that someone else would handle family problems while you focused on your career. You never once asked if I needed help or support. You're right, he said quietly. I guess I always saw you as the strong one, the one who had everything figured out. I was the one who couldn't say no. There's a difference. Karen took 3 days to call. When she did, she was defensive. I don't understand why you're being so dramatic about this, Linda. Families help each other out. It's not like anyone forced you to give us money. Karen, do you remember what you said to me at dinner? You said I was the difficult one in the family. Do you have any idea how that felt coming right after Mom called me useless? I was just joking around. It wasn't a joke to me. It never is. Do you realize that between you and Michael, I can't remember the last time either of you said something genuinely kind about me? The last time you supported me or celebrated something good happening in my life? She was quiet for a long moment. I guess I never thought about it that way. That's the problem. None of you think about it. You take my support for granted while treating me like I'm the burden. My mother, predictably, was the most persistent. She called 6 times on December 26th alone, leaving increasingly frantic voicemails. Linda, this is ridiculous. Call me back so we can discuss this like adults. You're being incredibly selfish. Your father is upset, and this is affecting the whole family. I don't know what's gotten into you, but this attitude needs to stop. We're your family. On December 28th, she tried a different approach. Linda, honey, I think I may have spoken too harshly at dinner. Maybe we can work something out about the money situation. But it wasn't until December 30th that she finally called and said the words I'd been waiting 32 years to hear. Linda, I was wrong. I'm sorry. I almost didn't answer. I'd been screening her calls for days. David encouraged me to take my time. But something about the 10th ring made me pick up. Hello, Mom. Linda, thank God. Please don't hang up. I need to talk to you. I'm listening. Your father and I have been talking, and I think I owe you an apology. A real one. I waited. What I said at dinner was unforgivable. You're not useless. You're the opposite of useless. You've been. God, Linda, you've been holding this family together, and I've been treating you terribly. It was the closest thing to a genuine apology I'd ever received from her. But I wasn't ready to let my guard down completely. Mom, it's not just what you said at dinner. It's been a pattern my entire life. The constant criticism, the comparisons to Michael and Karen, the way you dismiss my career and my accomplishments. I know, she said, her voice shaking. I know, and I don't have a good excuse for it. I think maybe I saw myself in you, and I was harder on you because of it. What do you mean? I was the middle child, too. I know what it's like to feel invisible, and instead of protecting you from that feeling, I think I made it worse. I think I pushed you harder because I wanted you to be stronger than I was. It wasn't a complete explanation, and it certainly wasn't an excuse, but it was the first time my mother had ever shown me any real vulnerability or self-awareness. The money stops, Mom. All of it. No more car payments, no more emergency loans, no more bailing anyone out. I understand. You're right to stop. We never should have put that burden on you. And the criticism stops, too. I'm not going to tolerate being belittled anymore, especially in front of other people. Okay. I'll try to do better. Don't try, Mom. Do better. Because if you can't, then David and I will build our life without this family's involvement. It was an ultimatum, but it felt necessary. For the first time, I was setting real boundaries with consequences I was prepared to enforce. 3 months later, my life looked completely different. The constant financial stress was gone, replaced by something I'd never experienced, actual savings. For the first time since college, I had money left over at the end of each month. David and I opened a joint savings account, started planning not just our wedding, but our future together. The emotional change was even more dramatic. Without the constant weight of family drama and financial obligations, I felt lighter, more confident, more like myself. My performance at work improved noticeably once I wasn't distracted by family emergencies and guilt-inducing phone calls. My boss noticed. You seem different lately, she said during my quarterly review. More focused, more assertive in meetings. Whatever you're doing, keep it up. I was doing something I'd never done before, prioritizing my own well-being. The family dynamics shifted dramatically once the financial safety net was removed. My father, it turned out, had been completely unaware of the extent to which my mother had been borrowing money from me. When he discovered the full scope of it, he was furious. 2 years, Patricia. You've been taking money from our daughter for 2 years without telling me. They ended up going to financial counseling together, something that probably should have happened years earlier. My father took a part-time consulting job to supplement their income, and my mother finally admitted they'd been living beyond their means. Michael and Karen, meanwhile, were forced to confront their own assumptions about family support. Michael called me 6 weeks after Christmas with an update that surprised me. I've been thinking a lot about what you said, he told me, about how I never asked if you needed help. And you're right. I was so focused on my own problems that I never considered you might have your own. I appreciate you saying that, I said. I want to do better. And I want to start by asking, is there anything you need help with? Anything I can do to support you? It was such a simple question, but it was the first time any of my siblings had ever asked it. We ended up having a 2-hour conversation about my career goals, my relationship with David, and my plans for the future. For the first time in our adult lives, Michael seemed genuinely interested in my life as a person, rather than just as a family obligation. Karen took longer to come around. She was still defensive about the money situation, seemed to view my boundary setting as a personal attack rather than a necessary change. But even she eventually started to shift her perspective, especially after a conversation with our grandmother. Eleanor had apparently given both of my siblings quite the talking to about their treatment of me over the years. Your sister has been sacrificing for this family while you two were building your careers, she told them. The least you can do is treat her with the respect she deserves. My relationship with my mother remained the most complicated. She was clearly trying to change her behavior, but decades of ingrained patterns don't disappear overnight. She'd catch herself mid-criticism and apologize, or make an effort to ask about my work in a way that didn't sound dismissive. It felt forced at first, but gradually it started to feel more genuine. The real test came when David and I started planning our wedding. I'd been dreading the inevitable commentary and attempts to control the process. But to my surprise, my mother mostly kept her opinions to herself. When she did offer suggestions, she prefaced them with things like, just an idea, or only if you think it would work. I like the photographer you chose, she said during one of our planning sessions. The samples you showed me are beautiful. It was such a normal, supportive comment that I almost didn't know how to respond. This was what healthy family interaction was supposed to look like. My father, on the other hand, threw himself into wedding planning with an enthusiasm I hadn't expected. He offered to help with costs, insisted on walking me down the aisle, and spent hours researching venues and vendors with me. It was as if he was trying to make up for years of standing by while my mother criticized me. "I'm so proud of you," he told me one afternoon as we sampled cakes. "Not just for standing up to your mother, but for building such a good life for yourself. David's a lucky man." Coming from my father, those words meant everything. The biggest surprise was how many other family members reached out to support me once they learned the full story. My Aunt Susan started calling regularly just to check in. My cousin Janet asked if she could help with wedding planning. Even some of my more distant relatives made efforts to connect with me in ways they never had before. "I always sensed there was tension," my Aunt Susan explained, "but I never realized how bad it was. Your mother has always been intense, but I didn't know she was being so unfair to you." It turned out that several family members had noticed the dynamic over the years but hadn't felt comfortable intervening. My Christmas outburst had given them permission to address what they'd been seeing but ignoring. The most meaningful change was in my relationship with David's family. Without the constant drain of my own family's drama, I was able to invest more emotional energy in building relationships with his parents and siblings. They welcomed me with an openness and warmth I'd never experienced. And for the first time, I understood what healthy family dynamics actually looked like. "Your family is so normal," I told David after a Sunday dinner with his parents, where no one criticized anyone, and everyone seemed genuinely happy to be together. "Yours can be too," he said. "It just takes time and boundaries." He was right. Slowly, carefully, with clear expectations and consequences, some of my family relationships were beginning to heal. Not all of them, and not completely, but enough to give me hope that the future could be different from the past. 6 months after that Christmas dinner, David and I were married in a small ceremony at a historic inn about an hour outside the city. The guest list was carefully curated, including only people who had shown genuine support for our relationship and respect for both of us as individuals. My father walked me down the aisle with tears in his eyes. My grandmother sat in the front row, beaming with pride. My mother was there too, dressed beautifully and behaving perfectly, but I could see the effort it was taking her to hold back her usual commentary. Michael and Karen both attended and even seemed genuinely happy for us. But the people who mattered most were the ones who had supported me unconditionally: David's family, who had embraced me from the beginning, my Aunt Susan and cousin Janet, who had become real sources of emotional support, and my longtime friends, who had watched me struggle with family dynamics for years and were thrilled to see me finally standing up for myself. "You look radiant," my grandmother whispered as she hugged me after the ceremony. "Not just beautiful, but truly happy. That's what I've been waiting to see." During the reception, my father gave a speech that brought me to tears. "Linda has always been the heart of our family," he said, "even when we didn't appreciate her properly. She's kind, generous, hardworking, and loyal to a fault. David, you're not just marrying a wonderful woman. You're marrying someone who will move heaven and earth for the people she loves. I just hope you never take that for granted the way some of us have." It was his public acknowledgement of the years of imbalance, and it meant everything to me. Even my mother managed to say something appropriate during her brief remarks. "Linda, I'm sorry it took me so long to see what an amazing daughter I have. I hope you and David build a beautiful life together." It wasn't a complete repair of our relationship, but it was progress. The most important moment of the day, though, came during our first dance. As David and I swayed to music in front of all the people who truly cared about us, I realized that I felt something I'd never felt before at a family gathering: completely, genuinely happy. "No regrets?" David whispered in my ear. "None," I said, and I meant it completely. The months that followed were a revelation. Marriage to David was everything I'd hoped and more. We bought a house together, using the money I'd been able to save once I stopped subsidizing my family's lifestyle. We traveled. We entertained friends. We built traditions that were ours alone. My career flourished in ways I'd never imagined possible. Without the constant emotional drain of family drama, I had energy to invest in my work that I'd never had before. I led successful campaigns, built strong relationships with clients, and earned the promotion my boss had hinted at. The girl who had been called useless was now running her own department. Some family relationships continued to improve gradually. My father and I developed a genuine friendship, talking regularly about everything from work to books to his new hobby of woodworking. Michael made real efforts to be present in my life, calling to check in, even asking for my advice on personal matters. My grandmother became one of my closest confidants, someone I could talk to about anything without fear of judgment. My relationship with my mother remained complicated but functional. She still struggled with her tendency to criticize, but she caught herself more often and made real efforts to be supportive. When I told her I was considering going back to school for an MBA, she surprised me by saying, "That sounds like a wonderful opportunity. You'd be excellent at that." It wasn't the enthusiastic support I might have gotten from Michael or Karen, but it was respectful and encouraging, which was more than I'd ever expected from her. Karen and I found a cordial but distant equilibrium. We were polite at family gatherings and exchanged pleasantries, but we never developed the close relationship I'd hoped for. That was okay, though. I'd learned that not all family relationships can be fixed, and that's not necessarily a reflection of personal failure. The most profound change was internal. For the first time in my adult life, I wasn't constantly seeking approval or trying to prove my worth. I knew who I was, what I'd accomplished, and what I brought to my relationships. David's love and respect had shown me what it felt like to be valued for who I truly was. And I'd learned to value myself the same way. One evening, almost a year after our wedding, David and I were having dinner when my phone rang. It was my mother, which wasn't unusual by then, but something in her voice was different. "Linda, I need to tell you something," she said. "Your father and I were at the grocery store today, and I ran into Mrs. Henderson from down the street. She was asking about you, and I found myself telling her about your promotion and your new house, and how proud I am of you. And then I realized, I don't think I've ever actually told you that." "Told me what, Mom?" "That I'm proud of you. That I've always been proud of you, even when I was too stubborn or too focused on what I thought success should look like to admit it. You're an incredible woman, Linda. You're kind and strong and successful and generous, and I'm sorry it took me so long to say that out loud." It was the conversation I'd been waiting for my entire life. And it came at a time when I no longer needed it to feel complete. But that made it even more meaningful, because it felt genuine rather than desperate. "Thank you, Mom," I said. "That means a lot. I love you, sweetheart. I should have been saying that more often, too. I love you, too." After I hung up, David looked at me with a smile. "How does it feel?" "Good," I said. And I was surprised to realize I meant it. It feels really good. But also, I think I would have been okay either way. And that was the real victory. Not that my family had finally learned to treat me with respect, though that was wonderful. The real victory was that I'd learned to respect myself enough to demand better treatment, and to build a life that didn't depend on their approval for my happiness. I'd learned that sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself, and for others, is to stop accepting unacceptable behavior. I'd learned that financial independence and emotional independence go hand in hand. Most importantly, I'd learned that the family you choose can be just as important as the family you're born into, and that surrounding yourself with people who see your worth doesn't make you selfish. It makes you whole. The little girl who had spent her childhood trying to earn love had grown into a woman who knew she was worthy of love just as she was. And that made all the difference in the world. Have you ever had to set difficult boundaries with family members who took your support for granted? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, thank you for listening. I hope it helps someone else find the courage to speak their truth. Wishing you all the strength to know your worth, and the courage to demand the respect you deserve.